All right, good morning, everyone. I have 9 o'clock, so I want to go ahead and get us started on time. My name is Marianelle Hall, and I am the Statewide Services Coordinator. And we are so privileged to have Dr. Nancy Gregg with us today. I'm sure many of you read from her bio in the invitation, but Dr. Gregg just has a wide variety of experiences as a professional educator. She has served as a classroom teacher, a school counselor, and a federal programs project director. She's currently an associate professor of education at Carson-Newman University, where she teaches both undergraduate and graduate teacher education programs. Additionally, Dr. Gregg has worked with a variety of U.S. Department of Education Title IV grant projects at UT Knoxville, Upward Bound, Educational Talent Search. And during her 12 years at UTK, she managed multiple grant projects, wrote grant proposals, and co-taught graduate-level grant writing courses. So needless to say, Dr. Gregg has a variety of experiences, and we are just so privileged to have her with us this morning. Obviously, we are hoping that this webinar will serve as a value add for our current Gear Up grant competition. But more importantly, we are hoping that this will be a resource that will help build grant writing capacity across the state. We know that many of our districts do not have grant writers on staff, so we are hoping that this will help build some of those grant writing skills. And personally, what I'm most excited about with this webinar is that at the end, Dr. Gregg is going to be sharing some resources to seek out funding opportunities. So like I said, we are just really lucky to have her today. Before I hand it over to her, I want to make a couple of administrative notes. So the first thing I will say is that we are recording this webinar, and we plan to post it on the Gear Up website and send it out so that you can reference it as you're writing your grants, or if you want to look back at the different opportunities she's going to discuss today, it will be available to you. The second thing is we will have a question and answer period at the end of the webinar. And the easiest way that we've found to manage that is for you guys to type your questions in the Q&A box. And I will be managing and watching those questions. And then at the end, when Dr. Gregg is presenting, I will ask her those questions so we can get those responses to you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Dr. Gregg. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to work with all of you, and I'm excited to share some of the information that I have had the privilege of learning over the last several years. Some of it has been trial by fire, so it's great to be able to share that with you. Now, as we're beginning, I wanted you to get an overview of what we're going to be looking at for the next hour. And we're going to talk about just the things that we're going to be doing to get started before you ever sit down to write. We'll just spend a little bit of time about that. The next thing we're going to go to, and this will be the meat of what we're going to be doing today, is getting down to the basics. What do you really do when you're getting ready to write a proposal or to respond to an RFP? And I'm sure you already know that RFP stands for Request for Proposal. So we'll be using that term RFP throughout the next hour. We're going to be looking at the various parts of a grant and some of the things that you need to put in there in ways that you can state them so they're very clear to the reviewers of your proposal. We're going to also look at partnerships and how those things can be integrated throughout a proposal for any response that you're making to a funding organization, because we all need resources, and partnerships can help extend the resources that you may currently have and take your resources far beyond what you ever thought they might be. So we'll look at that. We'll look at some of the options for finding additional funding, and then we'll have a question and answer session. So that's pretty much what we're going to be doing. All right, as we're getting started, let me just say that the very first thing that you need to know is your organization eligible? If you read a funding request, the RFP is going to tell you what the criteria are for eligible applicants. And you've got to look at that and make sure you read it all very carefully, because some may require that you have partners, some of them may require that you have certain socioeconomic levels. You can't just think about it in the terms of we just need more money, because every funding opportunity is going to come with strings, so to speak. There's going to be something, some reason why they're offering that funding opportunity, and you need to make sure that your organization meets that criteria for eligibility. And make sure that it meets your programmatic goals. Again, you don't want to just get money for money's sake. We've got to have it so that it's not square peg, round hole, but it's apples to apples, or it's something that matches exactly what you're doing, because that's going to give your proposal, you will obviously have the kinds of data and things to support something that's going to enhance your programmatic goals. And again, a very important thing to look at is, are there matching funds or in-kind services required? If so, before you even start the writing process, identify what those are and make sure that you have something in mind and begin to explore that. Now, that's just thinking about the beginnings of it, but now we want to really get down to what are the basics. As you begin to plan, first of all, obviously you've already identified this funding opportunity and you've said, yes, we're eligible, it meets the criteria for our organization and what we want to do, our goals and objectives, and so we're going to apply. So then read very carefully, read every item, and then you're going to want to address every item in the order that it's requested. The simple way to say this is just answer the questions they ask in the order they ask them, and just put it right back out there exactly the way it has been requested. When reviewers are reading, they want to see what they've been instructed to look for. And if you make them hunt for it, that's really not a good thing. So do everything in the order that it's requested. You're going to want to define the terms that you use in your proposal based on definitions within the RFP. There may be nuances of the way things are stated, and you may understand it one way, but if you read the RFP, it may give you a different point of view to look at. So make sure that you have done that you've define the terms. And actually in federal grants, if you're looking at U.S. Department of Education grants, they will normally define them within the Federal Register that they put out. That's the formal announcement of a funding opportunity, and they will include those definitions there. You're going to want to link those important terms that they have listed in the RFP to the descriptions of the things that you're going to be doing. In other words, if they ask for something that is sustainable, you're going to want to make sure you use that word sustainable. You're going to want to make sure that you've got that plan in your proposal. And you're going to need to make sure that you establish a need, and that's in capital letters for a reason, because the need is what drives your proposal. So you make sure that you have what you need in terms of pertinent data so that you can establish a baseline and then proceed from there. As an example, let me say before I go to this example, let me say that the things that I've just stated about reading the terms and defining terms and including those in your proposal are applicable to any funding opportunity, whether it's a foundation grant or whether it is a federal grant or a state grant. If they tell you they want A, B, or C, that's what they're looking for. So that's applicable in any situation. Now, for example, to drill down a little bit deeper, in the current Gear Up Tennessee request for proposals, it stated that there is a framework, and they've emphasized the things that you see here: rigor, reach higher, relevance, relationship, raise awareness, reinforce action. Now, those are terms that are important to this specific RFP. So as you are responding, what you're going to want to do is include those terms throughout your proposal as you described your proposed project. For example, reach higher. If you continue to read the Gear Up RFP, you'll know that services are not supposed to supplant local services. Gear Up services are supposed to support. So you may want to describe, if you were doing something like this, you may want to describe what your current activities are in Reach Higher. And then you may continue by saying, we're going to reach higher if we are funded through A, B, and C activities or events or whatever. So this is just an example of a way to relate the important terms in an RFP to the activities and plans that you have for your proposed project. Now let's move on to the grant process itself. Any grant process is going to begin with data. As I said earlier, data is what helps you to know what your baseline is. It helps you to know where you stand in the things that your organization, in the objectives and goals that your organization may have. Schools and school systems will usually always have data, lots of data, and sometimes, though, nonprofits that I've been involved with don't always keep as much data on their services. So my advice for anyone who ever wants to reach out and try to achieve funding through the grant process is to keep data on all your services, all your activities, and don't just keep it in anticipation of responding to one RFP, but keep it consistently. You never know when you're going to get a funding opportunity, so make sure that you keep data constantly. But in the grant process, data is your base. It's your friend, because the thing that really drives your grant proposal is the need, and you establish that need through the data that you have. You can use some qualitative descriptors, but providing the data that supports and demonstrates your need is what's going to drive everything else. Because once you've established your need, then you decide what are the actions that I'm going to take that address that need. Is it going to be activities? Is it going to be services? What's the target audience? Who are you working toward? And remember, what you're doing always has to go back to what the RFP has said their objective is. So remember that you establish your need. That includes providing a data picture of where you currently are. And the next step in your proposal will be the actions that you're going to be taking. Now, you've got to establish timelines. Those are very important as well, and we're going to be talking more about all of these steps in the grant process. But establishing those timelines is essential so that you know when you're going to do something and what you have to do with it, so that you're not caught not being able to report in a timely manner to the funding source, because that could result in loss of funding. So you have your actions, you establish when they're going to happen, you have them, you implement those actions within that timeline, then you evaluate them, because you want to know, and your funder wants to know, that you've been successful. So you're going to evaluate, and we're going to talk more about that in some more slides, but once you evaluate, then you're going to analyze what you have, and you're going to report it either internally through your programmatic evaluations when you're talking with your staff or something like that, or you will be reporting to your funding organization. So when you get all of those things together, you've got your basics for your grant process. So let's move on now to data. What is data? Well, basically it's factual information. You can see this is a Merriam-Webster definition of data. And it is the things that you use to measure what you're doing, to determine your success, to determine areas for improvement. You can use quantitative measures to describe whatever it is you're doing. And as you see at the bottom there of this slide, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. So if you know that you have a goal in the future, you want to know, how close are you to that goal? Are you 25% or 55% there? Or, you know, are you just right within striking distance at 88%? Knowing the data that you have gives you the opportunity to evaluate and move on. And remember, too, that there are different types of data. There's data that you can use that's quantitative, that's hard facts, that's numbers, and those provide the framework. They give you a quick picture. If someone tells you that 25% of something is this is how it is, then you're going to know that's not very much. That's just, you know, 1/4 of it. And that helps you to understand, or helps your reader to understand where you are. And sometimes, especially in the world of nonprofits, people tend to want to use the warm and fuzzy, heartwarming stories of how this changed, how an action from your organization changed this person's life or created something different from another in another student or another adult, which is great. However, that kind of qualitative data doesn't show the impact that the quantitative or number crunching data does. So you can use both. There are certain places, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but quantitative and qualitative data need to be kept so that you will have those to build into any proposal funding opportunity that you're going to be responding to in the future. I wanted to provide for you a little bit of an example, and this is just, for example, if you were responding to something that has to do with homelessness, you would obviously need to know how many students are homeless. You're going to need that quantitative data. The qualitative is going to support that if you have the opportunity to put that in. But what you're going to be doing is stating your case, painting your picture, and you can do that with the data, plus you need to cite the sources. Where did you get that? It's not just that you went out on the street and you counted so many people standing there, but statistics from city government or nonprofit organizations that serve the homeless, or whatever your source might be, you need to include that and include a reference list for where you got those data sources, so that if someone wanted to check your sources and say, do they really have a 97% homeless rate right here in this particular community, they can go and check it if they've got your source and they've got the reference list. So you want to do that. You can also make sure that you're addressing the specific needs in your area by adding that rationale. So where do you get data? All right. If you're in a school system or any sort of program that reports to someone else, you've got tons of data. But if you're looking for more specific data than your organization keeps, you can always go to local governmental agencies. Obviously, schools have their own data. Then you can use comparison data. That's always an important thing. If your area is specifically underfunded or has a very high rate of illiteracy or a high rate of homelessness, there's got to be a reason. And if you look at the comparisons of other neighborhoods, other counties, other school systems, then you're better able to make your case for your need, why you need funding, because you are obviously having these issues in your system or in your area of service. So look at comparison data, and you can compare not just local to the next county or the next city, but you can compare local to state and into national data to create that picture of need that you want to paint very, very clearly for your reader who is reviewing your proposal. Now, need. As you see, the Merriam-Webster definition is there, and it's a lack of something requisite, desirable, or useful, a condition requiring supply or relief. Sometimes we get need mixed up with what we just want. At one institution where I was working, we got some grant money, and the department chair decided to buy a specific piece of equipment. The problem was she really liked that equipment, and she wanted us to have it. What happened was, number one, the remaining faculty was not trained on that, therefore we never used it. So essentially, it sat there. The money was spent on something that no one ever needed, but she just wanted it. So while it was great to get that money, it really was not effective because we were not able to use it in the way it was needed. So your need must meet your funding agency's priority. If they're offering to give you money, there's a reason they want to give it to you, because that's what their priority is. And you should need, and I put that in air quotes, you need what they have to offer. And so that's what you're going to be writing into that proposal, the picture of need and why you, above other applicants, need that, whatever it is that the funding agency is offering. And again, remember that it needs to, your need should reflect the things that are used in your community, the things that are important to your community. So remember that the need is what drives everything you do. It drives the actions that you take, the services that you offer, everything. So now let's look. You've established your need. Where do you go next? The actions. What are you going to be doing? And how do these kinds of things address the problem that you are requesting this funding for? You need to look at the why of the situation you're addressing and look at the resources that you currently have. Who or what agencies or organizations can help you? Who can support your efforts? What are you currently doing, and how can they be extended or enhanced? And remember, think outside the box. Every community, every organization is serving a very specific area, and they have specific characteristics. So look at what is the problem, and how is it that this area, or why does this area have that? Why is it such a big problem here? Think outside the box and dig deep into the why of the problem so that you can go for the resources and the things that you need to do to address and improve, make a positive impact on the area, the problem in your area. Additionally, make sure that you're thinking about who you can involve, and those are your stakeholders. If you're going to write a proposal to address a funding opportunity, get those stakeholders on board very, very early, because you will most likely be required to submit letters of support. And those are essential. And when you get those letters of support, make sure you address other people outside your organization, like nonprofits or other governmental agencies, early in the process, because sometimes they don't respond that quickly, and you need to make sure you get them on the ground at the very beginning of your proposal writing so that you know that you can depend on them. Additionally, provide those stakeholders with the services or the request for services that you would like for them to supply, and make sure that those are listed in your letters of support. Not just a letter from an agency that says, oh, we really support such and such school system or such and such agency. We really support this project, and we think we need it in our community, and we'll be here for them. No, that really isn't good enough. Reviewers want to see that not only are stakeholders generally supported, but they're there and they've got actions or resources ready for you to make this project work. So that's a really important part to do early in the grant writing process. And again, there are SMART goals. If you can plan with SMART goals in mind, it's a great thing. Why is that? Because SMART goals, obviously, SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. This gives definition to your project activities. It creates a plan for you to write into your proposal, and if you do this, then you know what you're going for. Think about it as backwards planning. I'm sure you all probably heard that term, but begin with the end in mind. Then use SMART goals to formulate the steps to get you to that goal that you see as your vision in the future. What you may want to also do is make sure that you have these goals outlined clearly in your proposal, and then you will be able to include, as you put this in there, you'll be able to state that there won't be a loss of time or resources for startup should you be funded, because you've clearly planned this out. And again, if you are funded, it means you can hit the ground running, and you don't have to wait to do certain things that are required by your funding organization. So keep those SMART goals in mind as you're writing, and let that guide you into including all of the actions and evaluation checkpoints and benchmarks that you need. Okay, speaking of that, we've got timelines. The what, the who, and the when. So if you receive funding from an organization, they should have in their RFP guidelines for what they want back. Remember, we said early on, no one gives money without strings attached. So they want to know that you are willing to do whatever it takes to support what it is they want. They're giving you that money and they want something back for it, and that's usually in the form of reports or data. So make sure you know what reports are required, and make sure you know when they're due, because if you don't get them in on time, you run the risk of losing your funding. And if you're dependent on that, or if you've established your services within your organization so that you need that money, then you need to make sure that you're getting the data, collecting the data, and you can report what's needed when it's needed. Another thing to remember is that you need to generate accurate data. At one point when I was a talent search project director, I had counselors in schools. I had advisors, you might call them, in multiple high schools. What I realized initially after they came back was that I had 6 people inputting data into our main database, and as they would go to a specific high school, say for example, Maine County High School, as we were entering data about students that were coming in or activities or services there, sometimes they would enter into the database for the site Maine County High School. Then another counselor or advisor would put in MCHS, or another would put just Maine County. That gave us 3 labels for the same data. So when you ran your report, it was not accurate. So please make sure that you and any other users of your database enter consistently across that data management system, whatever it may be for you. Timelines include startups, implementation, and benchmarks for measuring the progress, and you need to know as you are planning who's going to be doing what and how many things are going to be in each phase, what's going to be included in a benchmark. Say if you have a benchmark that's, say, 3 months out from funding, what do you need to be reporting, and what do you have, so therefore what do you have to have completed by that benchmark? If you can collect this information, plan it in advance, and then collect this information and make a simple chart or visual, your reader of your proposal won't have to go through and dig it out and make their own little chart. So if you can, whether it's in a chart form or whether it's just, you know, in bullet points, you need to have some sort of chart or visual or a summary of the things you're doing, and you need to include it in your proposal. But again, don't get really specific, because it may be just a generic or a general, you need to have A, B, C, and D by benchmark 1. But leave yourself room to be flexible should you find that there's something else that needs to be inserted or needs to be removed. But creating that chart or visual gives them a big sense of the big picture of what's going to happen. Okay, let's move on now to evaluations. As you probably are already aware, there are multiple types of measurements for evaluation. Formative, I like to think of that as forming. What are you doing now? Formative data is what you're doing as you're going toward a goal. It's the steps along the pathway towards your objectives. Summative is exactly what it says, a summary. You're taking the information or the data that you've gathered through your formative measurements, and you're summarizing that to establish whether or not you have met your goals, what the outcome is. And that provides you with quantitative data that you can use for your reports and things of that sort. And it also you can keep qualitative data that you can use to support the quantitative stuff. For example, you may be making reports that require quantitative data, but you may also want to have a media release to the local television or newspaper about your program and its success. And in that case, you may use some qualitative data. That's where you put in that warm and fuzzy story about how one person or student's life was changed. And those are things that really provide human interest and put a human face on what your program is doing. So remember to put those things together to make your program show its best qualities and show its successes. As you analyze, remember you're going to have things that your funding agency is going to require. It may require that you do written reports. It may require that you present to certain audiences, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce or whether it is a professional organization. It may be that your data is to be entered into a larger database. And you may have something that's known as an Annual Performance Report, APR. With all the federal projects that I worked with, it was Upward Bound and those types of programs, we had an APR, and we had to enter data that was then sent to the larger database so that the federal government could review whether funding those specific discretionary grant programs was a worthwhile venture. Remember, too, as I'm sure we all know, we hear data-driven decision-making, and that is so important because it's required oftentimes by a funding agency, but it also gives you the information that you need to make programmatic changes. I can tell you, for example, in our talent search grant, we were supposed to provide information about college-going procedures and career development. And at one point, we would always take a handout that was given to the students at their weekly meeting at their local high school. We began to realize that those students made a game of folding up those things, making a paper airplane out of them, and getting them into the trash can before they ever left the library. That meant we were not meeting our goals of getting that information to them. So we had to take a step back, and we decided to create PowerPoints that the students watched with the counselor, and then we had the handouts available for those who wanted more information. So it was a programmatic change that we were able to make to meet our regulations and required services. So those are the type things you get when you keep the data that you need and you analyze what you've got. And again, this helps you when you're trying to determine sustainability of the project for the long term. And if you include these kinds of things in your reports, it also provides your funder with opportunities to replicate this in a similar setting as yours. As we continue, let's look at writing the narrative. I cannot tell you how important it is, again, to stress that you follow all the rules, answer the questions that are asked, use the key words and phrases that are in the RFP, because that's the language that the funder wants to hear. And your reviewers will have been trained to look for those key words and phrases as they're reviewing your proposal. Always, always, always proofread and check for grammar, spelling, and punctuation. It is so easy for us to read something, and after you've read it for like 10 times, you just don't see that that word that's missing or that misspelling or whatever it is. So it's always good if you can let another set of eyes look at what you've written, one that's not that familiar with it, because not only will they be able to review it for your content and see if it makes sense, but they'll also be able to spot any mistakes. And on that subject of content, always describe whatever your service or your organization is doing, whatever the activity or event is. For example, if you want to talk about how great and what great success you've had in the Pride Walk that you have been doing, that you've currently been doing with your organization, that's fantastic, except I don't have a clue what your Pride Walk may consist of. Is that seniors going to elementary schools and in their graduation caps and gowns? Is it teachers in their school alma mater garb, and when freshmen enter? The Pride Walk is showing what schools or colleges that they have graduated from. It could be anything, but if you don't explain that in your narrative, your reader will not know what you're talking about, and it's not going to be something that they're going to be wondering, and you don't want your reader to have questions. You want to provide them everything they need to know. Also, as an example, from the Gear Up request for proposals, you can see there are just certain basics that are required. And in this particular proposal, what you see is 1-inch margins, 11-point font, a 15-page maximum, and then you can see in the 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the things you have to have, and they should be returned in order. Make sure they're returned exactly as requested by the funding agency. Make sure you have followed all rules, whether it's 11-point font, 10-point font, Times New Roman, whatever it is. And it's very important, too, that you do save it as a PDF document, because if you have a maximum page allotment, if you're using Word or Pages, it can go over when it's transmitted electronically, and that can disqualify your proposal. So make it turn it into a PDF document so that when you have 15 pages, you know you have 15 pages and not 16 with one sentence on the next page. As you continue in writing the narrative, again, use the words that you see in the RFP. Make sure you provide or address the priorities in the order you're given, using that terminology. Make sure, as I say here, the verbiage that you see in that RFP is what's expected. That's precisely what will be looked for by the readers. And use descriptive data. If you say some, several, or many, that could be anything. So you may want to use things like 1/4, 2/3, 17%, 88%, but be descriptive so that the reader knows precisely what you're talking about. And also make sure that you can put a few things. You don't want to do this to everything. You don't want it to be filled with charts, but you can put some things, collect that information that you're putting into your proposal into a visual so that the reader can get that picture immediately and they don't have to look at it and figure out who it is that's going to do what, or when you're going to do each activity, or who your supporting partners are. So make sure that you get those things in there. All right. There's another thing that you always have to be aware of, and that is, are there requirements for matching funds? So what do you need for matching funds? What is a match? Well, for you as the applicant, remember that the things that you provide or your organization provides may be used. Office space, I've given you some examples here on the slide. You may include those, and you may assign some dollar value to those based on whatever the local usage is for cost for rental or things of that sort. You can figure out those things based upon the averages that you have in your area or your community. Remember, too, that anything a local business or industry does for you can be counted if you make sure that it is, just make sure that it is feeding into your activities and supporting what it is that you're doing to reach your ultimate goals. Remember to look at nonprofit organizations, faith-based groups, professional organizations, especially professional organizations can provide speakers of great knowledge for your activities or things of that sort. Faith-based groups are great for as a resource for tutoring or other service. Maybe they may want to do a meal or something like that for students. And obviously nonprofit organizations are great partners as well. And again, all the things that you see listed there, such as just providing incentives and job shadowing, can be very, very helpful from your local businesses and industries. And those are the types of folks that you want to have as your partners. Defining partners, well, that's a mutually rewarding relationship. Let's be honest, most people, or not most, but let's say anytime there's an organization, if they're asked to commit their time and their resources for something, they need to know what's in it for them. It's not that they're that grasping, but everybody has limited time and resources. And as an organization is going to determine where they're spending their time and their efforts, they want to know that it's going to meet what's important to them. So if you are going to a partner, going to an organization to ask them to partner with you for a specific funding opportunity, make sure that it's going to be mutually rewarding for all of you. Make sure there's going to be things that, opportunities for exchanges of ideas. Don't just ask them for things. Show them how their partnership with you will build their organization or their business or their company. And also make sure that you're approaching things that are really important in your community in the larger context. Make sure you understand the processes here, that you get your partner's input on things, and that you define what their outcomes may be in this partnership. And so these are some, if you're going to approach partners, these are some things that you can use, some reasons that you can use if you're going to someone. And let's just be honest, sometimes if it's a business or an industry, they're approached by people all the time. But before you ever approach them, make sure if you want them to be a partner in this funding opportunity to which you're responding, make sure that you discuss the kinds of things listed here in these bullet points with them. Make sure that they understand how their contribution will support your proposed project. Make sure they understand how it's going to reap benefits for the your clientele that you serve. Make sure that they understand that it's not just a benefit for you and your organization, but it has that far-reaching effect of making a change in the community and the things that happen in your community, and that it can contribute to all kinds of things, improvement in the state or in the national status of something. But make sure you have done your research and that you can address with those potential partners why they need to partner with you and why it is good for them to partner with you above any other applicant or any other request that they may have. And again, here's just some more specific things that you can discuss with potential partners, and make sure that you can answer these types of questions as you approach them. Because what happens for successful partners is that they come to a point where they realize that together they can approach and create a difference, a very positive difference to influence outcomes in your community, in your school system, or something like that. And knowing that you have your partners as your support will help to provide sustainability for future funding. It will also help to know that you can utilize your partners as connections for future funding, and that you can have replication. It may be that what you do at one school may need to be done at another school. What you do at one community needs to be done in another community or part of your area. So by sharing this information with your partners, otherwise known as stakeholders in your proposal, then you have the opportunity for that replication. So we'd like to summarize now and look at the things that I would recommend that you remember. As we said earlier, always maintain data. Get a file box, get a file drawer, get a file cabinet, but keep data so that you can refer to it instantly, because there's usually very little time between the publication of a funding opportunity and the time when it is due to be for your proposal to be turned in. And that means you need to have current data. You also can keep articles about whatever you've done in the past, because those are great to refer to. And let's face it, we all forget. So if we have things in our data file that say these are public recognitions of what we've done and what we've accomplished, then that lends credibility to your request. If you can, and especially if you're going to partners, it lends credibility to say that we are an effective organization, and given the right resources, we can make positive achievements to solve whatever this issue is. Remember, too, that you can just stick ideas in your file box, because it may be that what you feel like you need to do may pop in your head at this point, but this is not the right funding proposal for it. But you can write that down as a future idea to search for funding opportunities, or just keep it on the back burner for something in the future. And remember, too, many times you will not be funded, but don't just throw that proposal away. Keep it. If you can, ask for feedback as to how you could improve it, what you may have done or may not have done, and if available, see if you can get reviewer comments on your proposal, because that will help you to strengthen any future proposals that you choose to write. Proposals that didn't get funded are very, very valuable learning opportunities, so hold on to them. Again, making connections can provide you some of the best resources or your best ideas that you've ever had. So if you have events with your partners, if you have events for your organization, invite those people that you know have interests and priorities that you share as you look at the goal for your programmatic activities. Make sure you look at current periodicals in your field. What we do in one area of the country or one area of the state is very different from what is done in others. So if you read current periodicals, And many of those are, you've got reports or newsletters that are free, so just sign up for them and put them in that file that you keep. I have the privilege to review for the federal grant proposal, First in the World competition. There were 2 of those about 3 or 4 years ago. And it was amazing what was happening in the various parts of the United States, because I had proposals from the Northeast, Southwest, I had proposals from California out in the far west area, and I had proposals from the Southeast, just all over. And it was amazing to see the differences that were there and the ideas that I could get that could be implemented in things that we were doing right here in my backyard, in my neighborhood. Remember, too, it's very important as you're writing clearly to spell out all the acronyms. Rule of thumb is if you want to state an organization and you know you only have, you have a page maximum, then spell it out the first time through, provide the acronym in parentheses, and then make sure that you can just use the acronym throughout the remainder of the proposal, but always spell it out the first time you use it. And that way your reader will know, oh, I know what that is. Make sure that you give descriptions, brief, but at least help your reader to understand. And that's where it's important to have somebody read it that really doesn't know what you're doing, because then they will be able to say to you, I don't understand this. What is this activity? And then you'll know to put in a brief description for it. And as I previously said, ask for feedback on unfunded proposals so that you can improve for the next time that you are writing a proposal. Hopefully that kind of gets you into the mode of writing and responding to RFPs. Now, where's the money? All right, we want to look at that for just a few brief moments as we finish this hour up. And there are many types of money that accept grants or offer grant opportunities. And you can see they're listed here in these bullet points. So we're going to look at these just a bit closer. We have federal money that is available to you through grants.gov. And if you notice right up here, there's a little tab that says Learn Grants. Okay, you can go to grants.gov and you can see some of these things. And what you're going to find are there's opportunities from all these multiple federal agencies. You don't always have to go to the U.S. Department of Education to get education grants. Sometimes they come under the Department of Labor or Health and Welfare or something else. But going to grants.gov gives you the opportunity to see everything that's out there. So if you go to Learn Grants, then what you'll see is you've got over here on the left-hand side, you have Grants 101. It's the basics about federal grants and some of the things that you need to know. And you can see questions and answers. You've got all kinds of things here that you can learn, as well as download the applications. You can, as you see here, search grants to see what's available within a time span that you may be looking for, or what may have been available. But some grants come, especially federal grants, come in cycles. So if you're not sure, if you see something that's coming up and you're not sure about what it requires, you can go back to the previous cycle and look to see what the grants are and see what the criteria are for eligibility and some of the priorities within those. You can also look at, in the specific, if you want specific Department of Ed grants, you can go there and look at the URL that I've posted on the bottom of this slide to find some of the things that you may be specifically interested in. Additionally, you've got state money, and there are things on the state website where you can look for grants. So go to the state website, but also know that many times if you're a school system, the central office receives grant notifications or funding opportunity notifications. Also look for local money. Let me go back and just say you've got essential knowledge here at Kids Central. This is just something that you can get for some things that are available throughout the state. And then you've got local money. Let me move on to that since we're getting close on time. Just know that it seems like every business or industry that's really large has some sort of foundation or philanthropic arm. Look to see who the main employers are in your county. Look for educational foundations. Look for business and industries. And make sure that you go to service clubs or community organizations. Some community organizations may be a branch like Kiwanis or Lions Club or Rotary, have a local branch, but their national or international group has money available for specific things that meet that organization's goals. We have certain foundations. This is just a sample of some of the ones that are in the East Tennessee, and I'm sure if you're in Middle or West Tennessee, all you need to do is just put in grants or go and look to see check with your local Chamber of Commerce. They could probably share with you some of the things that they know that have grant opportunities or funding opportunities. You can look for corporate foundations on the national level, but remember, for example, Subaru will only provide funding for areas where they have a plant. So if you are thinking about that, go to the foundation or the corporation that you're thinking about, but also remember that some may have an eligibility test. An example of that is Honda. If you go online and you're thinking of applying for a grant, they have just a little bitty test because they have a limited number of priorities that they will fund. So if you don't pass the test, if you say you're wanting money for a certain project that is not within their scope of priorities, they'll tell you, thanks, but you're not eligible, your project is not eligible. So go there if you'd like to find some things. You've got private foundations such as Lumina, Bill and Melinda Gates. You've got all kinds of things that you can check on. So just think about what it is you want and what type of organization or foundation might serve that. And you can also find those things out by reading publications. Those free newsletters that I suggested that you apply for, that you subscribe to, they'll have things like that listed. So look at those kinds of things and see what you can find. There's also a couple of places, the Foundation Center and the Grantsmanship Center, that will have some things that you can look at. Both of these, I do believe, require some membership if you really want to delve deeply, but you can always get some ideas that will lead you someplace else if you want to look at foundations. And when you're looking, you may be surprised at what you find. For example, if you're looking for STEM opportunities, funding for STEM things, Captain Planet Foundation is sponsored by the Ted Turner Foundation, and they have money available for those kinds of things. So look in places where if you just look for STEM, I'm sure a lot of things will come up if that's what you're looking for, activities, funding for activities. And if you're still feeling unsure about writing a grant or a proposal, as we said earlier, you can go online to ed.gov, and there are overviews of what the discretionary grants are. They'll talk about some of the grant programs that are available through the U.S. Department of Ed. If you want more, you can go to other research guides. This one I have found to be very interesting and very informative, which you can just go there. It is Wisconsin Library, University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's very comprehensive, and obviously it will provide, as you see through these, through this federal funding proposals right down through here and non-governmental, they provide a lot of things for you to look at and workshop materials, as you can see over here on the right, to help you out. Another one that I'm sure you're probably familiar with, if you're dealing with educational issues, is Edutopia. That's the George Lucas Educational Foundation, and you can subscribe to their newsletter for free. You'll get information as well as funding opportunities, and it's very, very helpful. You can also see blogs about new ideas or things of that sort, and free downloads for materials. Again, Pearson has some grant writing things, and I think the important thing here is to note that they have sample grant narratives. Samples are always a good thing, so if you want to see some samples, this is an opportunity for you to do, for you to see some of those samples. So bottom line, you've got the tools. So I hope that this has equipped you to now go forth and shake that money tree and see what you can get for the future. If you have questions, I think Mary Nell's going to field those now. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Nancy, for that. If any of you have questions for Nancy, I think we can go a couple minutes over our time. If you could type those in the Q&A box, and you will see that if you click the blue question mark in the top right-hand corner of your screen. If you have any, feel free to type those. Right now, we only have one about printing out the PowerPoint, and we will make that available online in addition to the recording of this webinar so that you can download it and print it out. So let's give it a few more seconds. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and type those in the box. We'll just hang out for a couple more minutes. Okay, we have one from Dory Powell, and Dory says, would there be a preferred form for a reference page? Is one to be provided? What would that count in your, would that count in your page count if it is limited? And then we also have one from Monica Bain that says, are citations required with the narrative? I think at this point, I may unmute Troy, since these might be Gear Up specific questions. So give me 1 second and I will unmute him. Troy, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. So let me repeat those questions. So from Dory, we have, would there be a preferred form for a reference page, and is one to be provided? And would that count in your page count if that is limited?
So I would speak to this from like kind of just a broad grant writing perspective. I think that in terms of the grants that we have written and secured, we do often, if you're going to cite research, I would recommend that you cite it. It would count towards your page limit, and I think in terms of what style you use, whether it be, like a particular like MLA, AP, I think it really just, as long as you're consistent. That's kind of been our philosophy, is just to have some consistency in the style that we use, but it would count towards your page limit. And then the other question in terms of our citations within the narrative, I assume you're speaking to Gear Up specifically. I mean, I think that to answer that more broadly, anytime that you write a proposal, if you leverage research, I think that you should cite that. I think it speaks well of kind of the preparation that the applicant, how they're approaching the work that they'll be doing with the funds that are given. So I would encourage it. Nancy, would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely, and I agree wholeheartedly with the consistency. Normally, I work in social sciences, so we use APA, but make sure that you're consistent. If you're using MLA or APA, make sure you're consistent, and that's exactly what I would say, is that using that, citing those resources, show that you've done your homework, and that you're not just offering up your opinion, but it demonstrates very clearly that this is a problem, there has been research done on it, and that you are not trying to replicate something that has previously been done.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, the federal programs that we've responded to, the RFPs we responded to, kind of called out kind of very specifically asking for those kind of researched the research kind of aspects of the work that we were proposing, and so I would look at the RFP as well. And so as it relates to the Gear Up RFP, that isn't as much of an emphasis in terms of the program. We're really evaluating aspects of kind of a school's kind of readiness and preparedness, and to implement Gear Up and implement it well. So think about it in context of the RFP. I don't think it ever hurts. But most certainly, make sure that you're not doing it just to do it, but it kind of brings to a point some aspect of the proposal and the story that you're trying to tell.
And just to add to that, Troy, oftentimes in an RFP, they will point you towards specific references that they want you to use. So as Troy says, read the RFP carefully and see what's requested and then follow their instructions.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, it looks like those are the only 2 questions that we have, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much, Dr. Gregg, for your time. We really appreciate it. And like I said, this recording of the webinar will be posted on the Gear Up website, and we will also make the PowerPoint available for you to download and print if you would like. So thank you so much, everyone.